Sometimes, God hides his greatest warriors in the quietest places, and when the world least expects it, grace strikes like lightning. There was a time when fear ruled the land, a time when the sound of iron wheels meant death was near. Under the shadow of a ruthless tyrant, Israel trembled. His name was Sisera, the undefeated general, the hammer of Canaan. 900 chariots of iron thundered beneath his command, tearing through villages, burning fields, leaving only silence and ashes behind. His name alone could send entire nations to their knees. For 20 years, the people of God lived in chains, their cries rising into the heavens, unanswered until now.
The Lord commands
Across the hills,
and
under the rustling leaves of a palm tree, a
Have I
woman
not
lifted her
commanded you?
eyes toward the sky. Deborah, prophetess,
you go with me,
judge,
then I will
and
go.
servant of the Most
But if you
High.
do not go
She
with
was
me,
not clothed in
I
armor,
am
nor
unable.
did she carry a sword.
The-
Yet her faith was stronger than any weapon
honor
forged by
will
man.
go to a
She
woman.
sat beneath her tree, hearing
Do not be
disputes,
afraid.
but more importantly,
The Lord will
hearing
go
the
before
voice
you,
of God.
and the
And
victory
on that
is
day,
already
heaven
secured.
spoke. The Lord's command thundered through her spirit. It was time to rise, time to confront the unstoppable, time to believe that even iron can melt before divine fire. Deborah sent for Barak, a warrior from the tribe of Naphtali. When he stood before her, fear flickered in his eyes. He had heard of Sisera's chariots, how they devoured entire armies. How could 10,000 foot soldiers stand against such power? But Deborah's voice was calm, resolute, and radiant with holy certainty. The Lord, the God of Israel, commands you, go, take with you 10,000
Go
men of
with the
Naphtali and
strength you
Zebulun.
have.
Lead
I will
them up to
surely go
Mount
with you.
Tabor.
The
For the
victory
Lord
will be
himself
yours this
will
day.
lure Sisera to the river Kishon and deliver him into your hands. Barak hesitated. The weight of that promise was heavy. He whispered, if you go with me, I will go. But if you don't go with me, I won't. And Deborah, eyes burning with the light of heaven,
If you do
replied,
not come with me,
certainly, I will go with you. But know this,
won't
the honor
go.
will not be yours.
My
For the
heart
Lord will
fails
deliver
me.
Sisera into the hands
The
of a
Lord
woman.
commands it,
The prophecy was set in
Go
motion.
forth,
Destiny
for victory
shifted
awaits
like
you on
wind
Mount
before a
Tabor.
storm. And somewhere far from the battlefield, in a quiet tent beyond the hills, a woman named JAEL waited unknown, unseen, her silence hiding a plan that heaven had already written. This is her story. A story of courage, deception, and divine justice. A story that reminds us that God often chooses the least likely to fulfill his greatest plans. If this story has already stirred something deep in your heart, then you know this is more than ancient history.
General,
It's a
an
reminder
urgent
that
dispatch
God
from the
still
front
writes his
lines.
victories
You
through
reek of
ordinary people,
desperation, messenger.
through you,
Leave the
through
scroll
me,
and get out.
through every heart that dares to believe. When fear surrounds you, remember JAEL. She had no army, no weapon, just faith and the courage to act when God called. If you believe that God can turn your weakness into victory, write in the comments, Lord, use me like you used JAEL. Share this message with someone who feels unseen, someone who needs to know that heaven has not forgotten their story. And if you believe grace can rewrite every battle, subscribe to Bible in
The
Motion,
hour has come,
where every
Barak.
story moves
The
your
Lord
faith
goes
forward,
before us.
and every
Do not
episode
be
brings you
afraid,
closer
for
to
today
the God
Sisera will fall.
who still
strength
turns
you
the
need is
impossible
already
into victory.
within you.
The land of Israel was still cloaked in fear. For 20 years, the iron grip of King Jabin's army had crushed the spirit of God's people. The fields lay barren, the cries of the oppressed rose through the night, and the hearts of men grew weary beneath the shadow of Sisera's chariots. But in the hills of Ephraim, beneath the shade of a palm tree, a woman of faith lifted her eyes to heaven. Deborah, the prophetess and judge of Israel, heard a word from the Lord that would change everything. The time has come, whispered the voice of God within her spirit. Go and confront Sisera. Yet, Deborah knew that the command was not for her alone. Among the tribes, there was a warrior named Barak, son of Abinoam from Naphtali. He was known for his courage and for the quiet fear that sometimes clouded his resolve. Deborah summoned him to her side. When he arrived, dust clinging to his armor, she looked into his uncertain eyes and spoke with the calm authority of heaven itself. The Lord, the God of Israel, commands you. Go, take with you 10,000 men of Naphtali and Zebulun, and lead them up to Mount Tabor. I will lure Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his troops to the Kishon River, and give him into your hands. The words hung heavy in the air. Barak had heard stories of the iron chariots that tore through armies like blades through grass. 900 of them, unstoppable, invincible. Could 10,000 men, mostly farmers, shepherds, and craftsmen, truly stand against such a force? Barak's voice trembled. If you go with me, I will go. But if you do not go with me, I will not go. Deborah's gaze did not waver. Her tone was firm, yet full of grace. Certainly, I will go with you, she replied. But because of the course you are taking, the honor will not be yours. For the Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman. Her words struck like prophecy, a mystery that no one could yet understand. But Barak bowed his head, accepting the call. Faith stirred where fear once lived. Soon, the sound of marching feet filled the valleys. The tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun rallied to Deborah's call. Farmers laid down their tools. Young men kissed their families goodbye. And seasoned warriors gripped their swords once more. They climbed Mount Tabor, 10,000 hearts beating as one. Each man carried not just a weapon, but a prayer. And far away, in the stronghold of Harosheth Hagoyim, Sisera received word of Israel's rebellion. A cruel smile spread across his face. Let them gather, he sneered. They will crumble beneath the weight of my chariots. He did not know that even now, the God of heaven was setting the stage for his fall. The morning of battle dawned gray and heavy. A strange stillness hung over Mount Tabor, as if the heavens themselves were holding their breath. Below, on the wide plains of Kishon, the enemy gathered like a sea of metal and fire. From the mountaintop, Barak looked down at the endless line of chariots, their armor gleaming beneath the pale sun, their iron wheels slicing through the earth. Each one was a symbol of terror, a reminder of 20 years of oppression. 900 iron chariots, an unstoppable storm of steel and pride. Behind Barak, 10,000 men stood waiting. They were not born for war. Their hands had once held plows, hammers, and staffs. Now, they gripped spears and blades, their knuckles white, their hearts trembling. Yet amid that trembling stood Deborah, her robe moving with the mountain wind, her eyes fixed not on the army below, but on the promise above. She turned to Barak, her voice steady, filled with holy certainty. This is the day the Lord has given Sisera into your hands. Has not the Lord gone ahead of you? Those words pierced the fog of fear. Barak's heart burned again with courage. He raised his sword toward the sky and cried out, "For the Lord and for Israel." And the men answered his cry, a roar that echoed through the valleys. Then they charged. 10,000 warriors rushing down the slopes of Mount Tabor, their shouts mingling with the rush of wind. Across the plain, Sisera's confidence turned to fury. He shouted to his men, "Crush them, show no mercy." The chariots thundered forward, iron wheels cutting through the dirt, horses screaming as they charged into battle. But then, something changed. The sky darkened. Clouds gathered without warning. A cold wind swept across the fields, and from the heavens came a roar, not of chariots, but of thunder. Rain began to fall, first in drops, then in torrents. A downpour so heavy it swallowed the earth. The dry bed of the Kishon River burst into life, swelling with floodwaters that surged across the plain. Mud thickened beneath the wheels of Sisera's chariots. The horses stumbled. The iron beasts that once symbolized power became prisoners of the storm. Panic rippled through the Canaanite ranks. Soldiers shouted, slipping and falling as their chariots sank. The once invincible army broke apart in confusion. From the mountaintop, Barak saw it all. The prophecy was unfolding before his very eyes. He lifted his sword again, his voice rising through the storm. This is the hand of the Lord. With renewed strength, the Israelites surged forward. Their cries rose like thunder as they struck down their enemies. The battlefield became a sea of chaos. Iron, rain, and judgment mingling in one divine moment. Sisera watched in disbelief as his forces crumbled. The mighty had fallen. The proud were drowning in the very strength they trusted. His chariot was stuck fast in the mire, its wheels spinning uselessly. Desperate, drenched, and terrified, Sisera leapt from his chariot and fled on foot, his armor heavy, his breath ragged, his heart pounding with fear. Around him, the battle raged, but he heard none of it. He ran through the storm, his only thought to survive, to find shelter, to live long enough to fight again. He did not know that his escape was not an escape at all. It was a path written by heaven, leading him not to safety, but to justice. A justice that would come not from the sword of a general, but from the quiet hands of a woman waiting in a tent beyond the hills. The storm still raged across the valley, but far from the battlefield, silence had settled over the hills. There, among a cluster of tents belonging to the Kenite tribe, a woman stood at her doorway, watching the rain. Her name was JAEL, the wife of Heber the Kenite, a woman of quiet strength, unseen by history until this very moment. Lightning flashed in the distance. JAEL could see the shapes of men running, fleeing through the storm. The once proud army of Sisera was scattering, their cries swallowed by thunder and wind. And then she saw him, a lone figure stumbling toward her camp, drenched, exhausted, desperate. Sisera, the great general of Canaan, the terror of Israel. He recognized the banner of Heber's household and felt a flicker of relief. The Kenites had been allies of King Jabin. Surely, here he would find refuge. He staggered forward, breathless. "Help me," he gasped, his voice breaking. "Hide me, please." JAEL stepped out into the rain. Her face was calm, unreadable. The storm hissed around them as she spoke gently, her tone soothing, disarming like still water over hidden depth. "Come, my lord," she said softly. "Do not be afraid." She led him into her tent, guiding him with quiet precision. Inside, the air was warm, still. She spread a blanket over him, then reached for a bowl of milk and placed it in his trembling hands. "Drink," she said. "Rest." Her movements were graceful, almost tender, but behind those steady eyes, a storm far greater than the one outside was forming. Sisera drank deeply. The milk eased his exhaustion, and his body, heavy from battle and fear, began to sink into sleep. He muttered, half conscious, "Stand at the doorway. If anyone comes and asks, 'Is there a man here?' say, 'No.'" And then, the mighty general of Canaan, the man who had slaughtered and conquered for decades, fell into a deep sleep beneath the tent of a woman he thought was his ally. But JAEL's heart was not with Jabin. Her loyalty was not to the oppressor. She had seen the cruelty of Sisera's reign, heard the stories of villages burned, of children orphaned, of Israel's cries carried on the wind. And in that moment, she knew, this man, this tyrant, was no guest. He was a prisoner placed in her hands by the will of God. JAEL rose silently. Her eyes fell upon the tools of her daily life, a hammer and a tent peg. Ordinary tools, simple things, yet in her hands, they became instruments of divine justice. She stepped softly toward the sleeping man. The sound of rain masked her footsteps. Each breath she took was steady, deliberate, sacred. Her shadow fell across Sisera's still form. She knelt beside him, lifted the hammer, and in one swift, resolute motion, brought it down. But JAEL, Heber's wife, picked up a tent peg and a hammer and went quietly to him while he lay fast asleep, exhausted. She drove the peg through his temple into the ground, and he died. The sound was swallowed by the storm. It was over. The tyrant who had brought death to so many now lay still in the tent of a woman who had no sword, no army, only obedience and courage.
I chased a man across the plain.
The storm began to fade. Dawn was breaking.
Come,
the first
I will
light
show
of
you the
morning
man you are
touched the
looking
hills
for.
of Israel, a light of freedom, of victory, of justice fulfilled. JAEL stepped outside her tent. The rain had ceased. The world was quiet again, and on the horizon she saw a figure approaching. Barak, sword in hand, breathless from pursuit.
Shelter me, I
He had
beg
come
you.
looking for the general. JAEL called out to him. "Come," she said,
Do
her
not
voice
fear.
calm and sure. "I will show you the man you are looking for." Barak
Please,
entered
JAEL,
the tent,
let me
and
rest
there,
inside.
before his eyes, lay Sisera,
Welcome, General.
lifeless,
It is too cold
the
to stand
prophecy
outside.
fulfilled.
Come in,
Barak's
rest your
sword
armor,
lowered.
and warm
He
yourself
stood
by the
in
fire.
awe, silent, as the words of
Storm is
Deborah
fierce
echoed once
tonight.
more in his
Come in,
mind.
General, and
The
warm
Lord
yourself
will
by the
deliver
fire.
Sisera
Thank you.
into the hands of a woman. It was not his victory, it was God's. And through JAEL, a quiet, ordinary woman, he had done what no army could. The rain had ceased. The battlefield lay silent beneath the soft glow of dawn. Broken chariots were
Stand
scattered
guard
across the plain,
at the doorway,
iron wheels
JAEL.
half buried in the mud that once was their pride. Where terror
must
had
rest.
ruled, peace now whispered through the valleys. The mighty army of Sisera was no more. Barak stood still, gazing at the lifeless body in JAEL's tent. He had pursued the enemy with all his strength. Yet the final blow had been delivered not by his sword, but by the hands of a woman chosen by heaven. The prophecy of Deborah had come to pass, and the honor of victory belonged to one whom no one had expected. As the news spread, joy erupted across Israel. Men wept, women sang. The cries of despair that had filled the land for 20 years were replaced with songs of freedom. In the heart of the celebration, Deborah called for the people to gather. Her eyes shone with reverence as she lifted her hands to heaven. Her voice rose, pure and strong, a melody of gratitude that would echo through generations. Praise be to the Lord, for the leaders took the lead in Israel, for the people willingly offered themselves. Bless the Lord. The people listened as Deborah sang the story of their deliverance, how the mountains trembled, how the heavens poured down rain, how the river Kishon swept away the enemies of God. She sang of Barak's charge down Mount Tabor, of the thunder that drowned the roar of chariots, and of the courage of the people who dared to believe. And then her song turned toward JAEL. The crowd grew silent. Deborah's voice softened, filled with
Give
awe
me water.
and honor. Most blessed of women be
I'm so
JAEL,
thirsty.
the wife of Heber the Kenite, most blessed of tent-dwelling women. He asked for water, and she gave him milk. In a bowl fit for nobles, she brought him curdled milk. Her hand reached for the tent peg, her right hand for the workman's hammer. She struck Sisera. She crushed his head. She shattered and pierced his temple. Each word carried the weight of heaven's justice. The people wept as they listened, not from sorrow, but from the awe of witnessing what only God could do. A woman, unseen and unarmed, had become the vessel of his divine will. Deborah's song rose higher, praising the God who had delivered his people, the God whose power humbles kings and exalts the humble, the God who hears the cry of the oppressed and answers with mercy and might. As the final notes faded into the morning air, Israel stood reborn. The chains of fear had been broken. The God of their ancestors had proven once again that his promises never fail, and his deliverance comes in ways no one could predict. The name of JAEL would be remembered for generations, not as a warrior with a sword, but as a woman of faith, whose obedience changed the course of a nation. God's grace often hides in the quiet, waiting for faith to open the door. In Bible, the story of JAEL is not merely about a woman and a hammer. It's about the quiet ways God fulfills his promises. For 20 years, Israel lived under oppression. They prayed, they wept, they waited. And when deliverance came, it did not arrive through a great army, nor through the hand of a king, but through the courage of a woman in a tent, a woman no one saw coming. Through JAEL, we see a divine pattern that echoes throughout Scripture. God uses the unlikely to accomplish the unthinkable. He chose Moses, a stuttering shepherd, to speak to Pharaoh. He chose David, the forgotten son, to slay a giant. He chose Esther, a young exile, to save her people. And now he chose JAEL, a quiet woman of the desert, to bring down a general who terrified nations. Why? Because the Lord delights in overturning human expectations. He reminds us that victory does not belong to the strong or the skilled, but to those who trust and obey. When JAEL picked up that tent peg, she wasn't just holding a tool, she was holding obedience. She acted not out of vengeance, but out of alignment with God's purpose. And in her act, heaven declared, no one is too small, no one is too ordinary. No act of faith is ever wasted in God's hands. JAEL's tent became an altar of victory. Her courage became a song. Her obedience became a legacy. So when you feel unseen or unqualified, remember her story and know that God is writing his miracles through hearts that are willing, through lives that simply say, "Yes, Lord, use me." Maybe you're in your own battle right now. Maybe you feel outnumbered, overlooked, or too small to make a difference. But remember this, the same God who turned JAEL's tent peg into a weapon of victory can turn your weakness into strength, and your quiet obedience into a testimony of grace. If you believe that God can use even the smallest act of faith to bring about his greatest victories, write in the comments, "Lord, use me for your purpose." Share this story with someone who feels unseen, someone who needs to remember that heaven notices every faithful heart. Because sometimes the most powerful miracles begin in the most ordinary places. And if these stories move your spirit, if you long to see the Bible come alive in cinematic motion, subscribe to Bible in Motion. Here, every story moves your faith forward. Every episode reminds you that grace is still at work, rewriting hearts, redeeming lives, and revealing a God who turns the ordinary into the extraordinary. For the battle is not yours, but God's.
This is the best meal we've had
May
in
her faith
ages.
remind you, when God is in the story, no shadow is too dark, and no life is too small to shine his light.